Um,
So, what have you
okay,
been
yep.
working on?
Um, so not anything in a concerted fashion, unfortunately. I've sort of not been particularly productive the past week. I have like uh I feel like I've like done some good stuff on the side a bit, but yeah, didn't really end up focusing particularly well. Um, so I started the sort of project planning example type stuff, but haven't produced that much. Um, yeah, I had some observations about how um, or about doing some FI in the middle of the week, which I spent a few hours doing, not working on homeworky type stuff, but just getting up to date with stuff, and I posted some things. Um, it was sort of interesting in that I really sort of enjoyed and was glad to do, but when it comes to like practicing stuff, yeah, I don't have as much sort of like motivation or to do that. So it's sort of, I don't know, it's a bit interesting. I'm sort of thinking about it still. I'm trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Um, anyway, I did spend a few hours this morning working on this project planning stuff though, and I feel like I've sort of, I don't know, maybe figured out some points where I'm having some issues. I don't think I'm getting like
Okay.
particularly stuck, but I am, running into uh, maybe obstacles that I'm not dealing with effectively, is maybe the way to put it.
About FI stuff and practice.
Hmm.
You can practice things while doing other things. Like, if you're writing an FI post, you can be practicing some of the skills we've worked on. Um, you talked about like reviewing your notes and organizing them and making checklists and stuff, and you can do that like in relation to I want to write an FI post. I'm going to go review my notes to find a couple tips and then use them for my post, for example. Those things can be connected together, and loosely, the general way to go through life is whenever you're doing something, you have in mind one, two, three things that you're trying to learn. You know, ways you're trying to do it better, fix some error you're making, whatever. So, whenever you're going to do something, try to think of at least one thing you can pay attention to and give some conscious attention to while you're doing it. It'll make it a productive activity where you learn something in addition to uh, like the sort of direct point of the activity. Well, they can be related. Like if you're playing a video game, you can think about um, why do I keep falling in pits with Mario? What can I do differently? Like that could be the thing you're paying attention to is in what circumstances do I fall in the pits? And then you'd be learning something. Rather than just like playing the game and being like, I hope I get better.
Yep. Um,
And you can't have
uh,
too many things like that. Like sometimes people have like a checklist of 20 things that they could do better or whatever. And it's fine for that list to exist, but while you're playing the game, you can only actively pay attention to a couple things other than just playing itself. Like you want to be able to do an activity and then have a little bit of mental energy left to think about what you're doing while you do it, but it's only a limited amount. Like you could be writing an FI post about epistemology, and that'll take most of your attention. And then at the same time, you could be thinking about not using commas wrong as like an extra bonus thing that you're paying attention to. And that way you're always like learning one thing so you get better in the long run.
yep. Um, so it's interesting I mean, it's coincidental you brought up the like Mario example. Um, because I played a bit of Mario Galaxy over this past week, and there was like one particular stage that was like pretty difficult, and so I Like, when I get stuck with stuff like that, I do try and take a step back and think about what am I learning or what are the components. Um, Actually, 2 levels I can think of where or 2, like, stars particularly, where that sort of thing happened. Um, and yeah, and my process was sort of similar on each. Or the second one, I decided to take a break before attempting it again. Um, but yeah, but the first one was sort of more obvious where yeah, basically tried to break down the skill and focus on what I was, um, like, missing out on and try and improve that. I guess that doesn't directly, like, analogize to the writing a post plus paying attention to commas, except insofar as, like, the other thing in mind is, I guess, like, uh, sort of for lack of a better name, like the FI method of learning. Does that make sense? Like, I'm trying to keep in mind the idea of getting better at learning while doing stuff. Um,
Yeah, so if something is going wrong, you notice and take a step back instead of just beating your head against the wall, and then try to use things like brainstorming. So you're like watching out for opportunities where brainstorming would be worthwhile because it's not going smoothly.
yep. Um, the thing that occurs to me, I'm just trying to think. In some of the brainstorming that I was doing, or this sort of like project planning examples thing, um, I was so part of this is, I guess, like a sort of general. Um, it's like fairly general. Like there's oh, let me just take a minute and organize this thought. I think one of the things that I've been trying to practice is the mindset about problems and making sure that when I realize that there's an issue, that I can take corrective steps or recognize when I don't know what corrective steps to take and how to solve that, etc. Um, I'm somewhat sort of cautious or worried saying that in that, uh, I mean, my initial thing I was going to say was that I'm like I should be making progress beyond it or something like that. I um, shouldn't be worrying about this anymore. I should have moved on to something else. But then um, that sort of occurs to me that it's like we shouldn't be too judgmental with ourselves and progress and stuff. So I can either like look at a lack of progress as a problem and try and solve that, or I can be okay with this and just keep sort of keeping things in mind as I go about other activities. Um,
Yeah,
I
some of
guess, yeah,
the really generic philosophy things are deceptively simple. Like they don't sound super hard, but they're actually some of the stuff people have the most struggle with. Because I think partly they interact a lot with static memes and certain bad ideas in our culture that suppress rationality and so on. Like, if you look at some rationality ideas in isolation, some of them are pretty simple, but then actually living that way can be really hard after having gone through childhood and school and so on, and being immersed in a culture that, like, there's something weird about it where it's hard in our culture. Most people are terrible at it, but a lot of people look at it and say, "Oh, that sounds nice. That sounds kind of easy." And like the things that make people bad at it and unable to do it and so on are a bit hidden. People don't look at it and say, "I don't like that because of this well-known reason. Like this rationality thing is terrible." They look at it and say they agree with it, and then something stops them from doing it. So there must be some sort of hidden danger lurking.
yeah. So one thing that this reminds me of a bit is uh, so I think I posted it. Oh, so yeah, on IR's microblogging. I replied to the um, he posted this video, "Why do speedrunners hate their runs?" And there's some interesting stuff in that
Yeah,
about
I saw that
line
video
dis
too.
um, Anyway, yeah, so I'd been thinking about posting something about it. I'd sort of been thinking about it on and off, and IR posted it, so I figured I would. But the uh, what do you call it? The timestamps thing. Um, I feel like that's maybe an example of this like deceptively simple thing, in that it's something that's really simple. It's really easy, and people will agree that it's like really useful to include, and then not do it. Um, yeah, maybe it's a bit sort of
Hmm.
it's
I'm
not
not
that
that
interesting,
familiar with
but
that. People use timestamps sometimes. They definitely, not just timestamps, but like sources and references in general. Like they often don't give page numbers or specific names of articles or things like that. Like they're pretty bad with sources, pretty commonly. But some people do them sometimes.
yeah. Actually, I'm not even like I was gonna say another example was that came up for me recently was someone asking about some code that I either wrote or modified, and anyway, they weren't overly specific, and so I sort of asked for clarification, and they didn't send me a link, so I had to ask for a link. Um, just like GitHub with a permalink to the uh, commit and line number. Um, anyway, yeah. So but I've also had a lot of pushback sometimes when sort of emphasizing yeah, the importance of that sort of stuff, which might indicate that I don't understand it well enough to convince people. Um,
I'm confused. Are these chat messages from today? Because I don't remember
I think
typing
so.
any dots today. I
Oh,
don't think I typed those.
okay. I saw them come up during the like while we were live.
Oh! Oh, I get it. Justin was logged into my account. That's what happened.
Oh, yep, yep, yep. That makes more sense.
And then he typed four dots. That was what he thought my account should type. That's odd.
Um, I'm not sure. Anyway, he can tell us. If he's here.
Okay, yeah, so Justin commented. Um, oh, with sources, I was gonna say that academics use sources, but they actually often use them badly in a different way. They throw in too many citations without actually thinking them through or reading all of them. Like they feel that
Like
they're
check the
required to have
abstract
a
and
bunch of citations. So they skim abstracts, they cite allies. It's partly like a networking thing.
yep.
Sometimes they just
Well,
tack them on at the end, like they already have their conclusion, and then they're like, oh, but no one's going to believe it unless I have 10 sites. So then they go find 10 things that look like they agree, which is completely different than actually building on other ideas.
yeah, it's I sort of feel like citations are one of those like the minimum, or one should sort of strive for the minimum number of citations necessary. Um,
People also use citations to dodge responsibility. So they say this fact comes from this person and he has a great reputation and blah, blah, blah. So that's why I accepted it. And it's not my job or responsibility to track down where he got the number and check his sources and like follow the entire chain of sites to the original. A lot of
mm,
people just like actively oppose doing that kind of thing and will use stuff with no idea what the original is. I've run into people like if you actually question them, they'll defend that.
so it occurs to me there's like a recursive problem there, which is say you're an academic entering like a new academic, and you're in a environment where everyone's has like 100 citations to every paper, and you want to be able to like check everything, except that you're in a culture where there's like 100 things to check for every like it sort of becomes this like recursive issue of bloat. Whereas if things were clean, then you would end up with a lot of like common citations, like the graph would like collapse a fair
Right.
amount, I suspect.
Yeah. There's poor convergence or collapsing in their citation graph because it's just all over the place. It's not actually related to like which are the key ideas and the canonical versions of them.
Yep. Yeah. Um, I guess it's also, well, actually, an easy way to bloat citations is include a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't be surprised if it was wrong, and sort of discuss it. Um, yeah, I feel like if that would be another sort of criterion to judge what should be cut out of a paper or not. Is that if you're actually contributing knowledge, then you shouldn't include stuff that you would not be surprised that was incorrect. Oh, the footnotes. I've seen things like that. Often, like I've seen that sort of stuff in as a joke. Um, but I haven't read many legal stuff, legal papers.
Right, so Justin was saying that you can practice making trees while doing something else, for example. Yeah, a lot of the FI things are methods that can be used while doing something else. So it makes it easy to get multiple benefits at once.
Yep.
Like you can sort of go through life and do projects and then simultaneously always have in mind one meta idea about problem solving or learning or something at a time that you're also working on simultaneous to the project.
So I was fairly sure I wrote some stuff about focusing on like one, two, three ideas in here somewhere, but I can't search for it.
Oh, maybe
Um,
it was our previous um tutoring session notes because we talked about it some then, I think.
um, oh yeah, no. Well, this was stuff that I wrote like today, so um, it's reasonably fresh. But it's sort of I think it was a bit large in scope what I tried to do to start with. Like, there's a decent amount of stuff in here, but it feels a bit jumbled because I tried to, well, basically be overly clever. Um, and I realized towards the end, uh, the so 4CB is where I realized it.
Ah, yeah,
Um,
so glancing at this, it looks over-engineered for small projects, but completely fine or even small for big projects. Like it really varies with project size how many steps you should have and meta steps and so on.
yep. Um, so let me just take notes for things to discuss with that regard. So yeah. Um, so in terms of the overly complex for small projects, I did write some stuff down um, about this, um, where so yeah, I've got like here, am I being taking too long or being too verbose? Um, might that indicate getting stuck? Um, anyway, yeah, so I'm sort of like considering that, and then I move on. Um, actually, like twice, I think, reducing scope without finishing the thing above. Maybe, not sure. Anyway, the um, sort of to go backwards for this, I had this idea of um, doing an example project plan of project planning as like the content sort of thing. Um, which I think was overly complex, and I didn't need to start with that first. I sort of wanted to start with it because I could like try and write down stuff about the method, uh, but it ended up sort of I think it's sort of better to practice, like, don't worry too much about being explicit with the method, but practice like simple stuff first so that you've got a good idea of the method, and then focus on like making the method better. So this is like step one versus step two, I think. Um,
Yeah,
like in the
finding
yeah,
some small successes first and then making step-by-step progress. Usually good.
yeah. So this clever project was possibly a thing. Generalizing too early sort of catches there. One thing that was maybe an issue was that like the context that I was starting things in up here was that there would be like three sort of projects that I'd cover. Um, like, well, this project was doing each of these three things, sort of thing. One of them was like review and practice material, where this is like an example as well as like the plan to make the whole project or exam or whatever. Then like a simple example of moving house, and then a more complex example of like writing a short book on something particular. Um, I have a question about this later, by the way, which I'll just note down. Um, um, because I was thinking about, I had in mind this like writing a short book as a example project. I think I tried to go too broad, like too fast, and I would have actually ended up having too many issues with project planning if I'd gotten up to this point. Because I just haven't like practiced enough with small stuff. Um, like I'm not fast enough doing something as simple as like moving house, which really shouldn't be that bad. Um, I mean,
Right. What's type
this
level programming?
so type level programming, uh, when you've got like a static type system, um, like C or TypeScript or Haskell or whatever. Oh, sorry, C, yeah, C or C++. Um, you can sometimes do some of the work in the type system instead of doing it in like at runtime. Um,
Oh,
so
okay. So it's a type of meta programming.
yeah, the so stuff like C++ is pretty basic. You can do a bit more interesting stuff in TypeScript, but it's sort of a bit difficult. Um, and then you go to something extreme like Haskell, where you can do stuff like guarantee that a list is always has at least one entry, or uh, have a like dictionary where you don't know the keys in advance, but every part of the code that accesses a key guarantees that that key is defined at the time. Um, so it's like there's no runtime checks to guarantee those things. It's sort of correct by construction, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
The issue with so I've done some type level programming before, in a few cases. So one of them, for example, one thing I did was we had a document structure, like a YAML document sort of thing, or JSON document,
Yep.
and uh, that had like basic types, like list of strings, list of ints, int strings, balls, whatever, that sort of jazz. Um, at the first sort of like representation of this document was just like or because of the way that TypeScript work, the the document was like the type of the document was all of the static data, so like it would be just loaded out of um, YAML, but then also included like meta references and unresolved variables and stuff like that, so that when this document was being processed, the parser could go and like get some data from somewhere else, or like the output of another operation, and then populate the document so that it was finalized. Or that's the term I used. Sorry. So the first document, or the first type, had all the basic types plus a bunch of like functions essentially, or like funcs. And then the finalized type would, like, it was it didn't know it, like there was like a type wrapper sort of thing, like finalized, like in TypeScript or Java or whatever else it was. It was sort of like this. That sort of thing. So this YAML document, so it could be like uh, so it's like a finalized type there. That's fine. Just like that. So the idea here is that this like ref thing here is not a final value. It's based on whatever this is. And so
Yep.
the parser has to like go through and process this. So in the type system, this is represented as like a indirect reference type thing. And the finalized type guarantees that there are no indirect references left. And
Right.
so basically what that means is you need to, like when you take in this incoming document, your whatever function processes that. So it takes in like a YAML document with funcs and it returns a finalized YAML document with funcs. You need to like guarantee that there is no possible way that any of like this stuff is left in the document, essentially. And
Yep.
with a type system, you can like implement this. It's fairly complex, like in terms of this finalized thing, because it supported maps, lists, and the basic JSON types. I think it was something like 20 or so lines of a type declaration. That was like split up uh, to sort of be readable. But the type of thing like um, what would it be like? This would be on a new line. So like all of these sort of like switchy type cases sort of thing to see what the type extends and then to like produce different output depending on that. And it was sort of happened in a recursive fashion, but it ends up being quite complex.
Yep.
The weird thing about type level programming is that it's more like declaring mathematical formulas and constraints and all the information necessary for like a theorem prover to evaluate it than it is like normal programming.
Right.
And it's a thing where there's very sparse like I would say like documentation in terms of the compiler type stuff. There's usually the documentation is sort of fine, but there's very few examples and there's no like exercises, or I've never found like a consistent body of work that's like read this to understand type level programming fully sort of thing. Um,
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so my idea was to sort of try and have like a project to write a mini book as a way to learn it myself, but also then produce something that other people would like, that fills a niche that needs filling, essentially. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a good plan or not.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I think learn something and write what you learned is a good type of project in general. Um, Not enough people share what they learned, and then other people have to go learn it from scratch, and everyone's like Googling and being like, all the Google results suck. And then, 10 or 100 or thousands of people all go through that same experience. And then on top of that, they don't get a portfolio or web traffic or whatever either to show for it.
Yep. Yeah. That's actually like most of the resources on type level programming I found have been people writing one or two blog articles about like a particular problem. Um,
Yeah,
some of which aren't super high quality. Um, one thing though, so I mean, so it occurred to me, I think this was about a week ago, maybe more. Anyway, I had this problem with some front end code using Vue.js that I've actually had this problem before and solved it before, but didn't write down my method the first time, and then ran into this problem again and didn't remember how I solved it 2 years ago, and had to like resolve it. Um, I took some
yeah.
notes, but I haven't like written it up, and again, there was no good Google stuff on it. Anyway, yeah, it's I don't know. It bothers me that I'm not doing that. Um,
There's always a bit of extra overhead to um, figure out exactly what the repeatable method is and write it down, as opposed to just getting it to work at all.
yeah,
To do that properly, you often have to like redo it a couple times to make sure like these are the right steps that actually work.
that's a thing that I've run into before, where I've like sort of gotten to the end and it's like, oh, cool, now I understand this, and then not having like it's like I don't want to spend 3 hours going through this thing again to figure out exactly what was necessary and what was not, um, because
Yeah,
it's
finding a
always like
minimal set of steps takes extra trial and error.
it's like a lot of these problems are uh like instrumental to achieving a larger goal. Um, like with this Vue TypeScript thing, it was that I wanted like particular libraries to work together and not to have to use like different libraries um for like making HTTP requests and having like multiple different instances of stuff floating around the application, because that's sort of just bad practice. But yeah, it took a long time relative to the output for that. Um, I think one of the things I was thinking of while doing it was, and I didn't end up doing anything, but like whether there was a note-taking strategy or a documentation strategy that would make it a lot easier um, to like go back over after the fact. Um, so instead of taking like 3 hours to, well, I mean, it would probably take 3 hours to produce a post anyway. That's okay, but not taking like another 10 or 20 hours to produce the post. Um,
Yeah, it
anyway,
depends
yeah,
what
the
you
main
want. Sometimes just saving console logs um, is documentation. Not very friendly, but very easy.
um, yeah, I mean, um, I've made sure to turn on the right option now so that ZSH doesn't like lose history if you exit the terminal incorrectly. But uh, I find that helps a lot, like having really good like history uh for like Bash or ZSH or whatever helps a lot. Yeah, I wonder if there's like named stuff, because that would be like Askinema is sort of okay, but it's a bit like full fat for this sort of thing. Um,
Yeah, sometimes I just clear console before I'm doing a specific project for a few hours, and then copy paste the entire log into a text file afterwards.
yeah, I should figure out a method for something like this, because I'm sure that like either like with T or Tmux or one of those sort of utilities, there should be an easy way to like save everything. Um, yeah, anyway, that's something I'll think about in time. So if I was going to do this type level programming sort of book or like series of articles or whatever it would be, it wouldn't be that long, but one of the main things that I'd like to do is figure out how to come up with like good exercises for it, because way you think about it is really different from normal programming. Um, like you declare things like out of these 4 type parameters, the first 3 type parameters imply the fourth type parameter, and the fourth type parameter implies the first 3 type parameters. So you can establish like mutual dependency between the types that are involved in the constraint. Anyway, just thinking about that is, uh, it's just not like a normal program.
Yeah, having simple examples and then building up to medium examples and so on will help people understand what's going on, and then working through or creating their own examples, starting with simple ones, um, will help them remember anything and be able to actually do it.
I'm just thinking that like if I try to do this now, this might not be a bad method, but I don't think I'd be very good at it yet. I need to practice more on something, and so something like the view TypeScript thing is a good shorter thing to do. Um,
Yeah, if you do more things that are one blog post in length, that would be good practice.
so I feel like it's sort of obvious that I've got like some issues with like time management plus, uh, I don't know, my attitude towards this sort of practice. I don't know if like I think I wrote up here like uh, um, I don't know. I feel like when I do stuff that I particularly don't enjoy doing, it I get burnt out pretty easily, which I'm sort of not very happy about. But I also wonder that
You need to do stuff you don't want to do? Like, why are you doing that stuff at all?
I because I'm the way I sort of look at it. I mean, arguably, I shouldn't have much more of that sort of thing to do. In that, I've sort of, I guess, had like an idea along the lines of, uh, I feel somewhat obligated because of like indirect connections to larger goals and because of like interdependence between, people working on a project and volunteers and whatever else. Um, so I feel some sense of obligation and I want to sort of like resolve it to sort of like get the thing done because once I do that, I can like as long as I don't take on more stuff, then I can
Prior
sort of like
commitments.
tidy that up. Yeah. Um, and particularly like trying to get those out of the way so that like whether, some ways whether it passes or like or whether it succeeds or fails is almost like less important than getting it done. Um, sort of thing. Um,
Yeah, prior commitments are something people often are conflicted about. Because on the one hand, they consciously think it's a good idea to keep my commitment and follow through, and I have all these reasons. On the other hand, they have some reason they don't want to. They'd rather do something else, and then that can be hard to resolve.
Yeah,
Also, I was gonna
yeah.
say about scroll up a little. It's one of the notes you were showing me a minute ago.
It was it on that page, or otherwise I can
Up
scroll
more.
around? Oh, sorry. That's just the
I'm not sure what it was. I forgot.
um otherwise it could be further up on this. This was the where I had
Oh,
burnout at the top.
burnout. That was the one.
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about burnout and how to check if it's an excuse or a real problem in some of the sessions a couple months ago. So I was gonna say that reviewing that would be a good idea because I specifically remember going over some ideas about that.
I remember talking about some burnouty stuff. I'm not sure what to search for to try and find um the thing. Um, can we? Do you mind if we cover it a bit again? In terms of making sure burnout is real type thing,
Um,
or
I mean, I don't mind, but I don't have the reasons I gave loaded in my mind at the moment.
yeah, okay, no, fair enough. Um, I think I need to. Yeah, I can just. I think it was a week, and we had 3 sessions that week. Um,
Okay, yeah, I just found that week, so it was 7, 19, 21, 23. I believe that is the right week, the first one where we were talking about procrastination and stuff.
okay, yeah, I might need to watch. Well, I mean, in terms of
Yeah, so it's probably
so
one of those 3 videos.
yep. I've got nil in notes for 29. That's useful, Max. All right, let me just make a note of that so I can check that out again later. Um,
Yeah, I'll put this on screen so you can go to screen. There.
yep. Oh, yep. Um,
Yeah, so I know
YouTube's
some of these
buffering.
topics came up again later, but I believe this is the first week we talked about it.
Oh, I've got the days one off. Um, because time zones
Oh, okay.
makes more sense. All right. Cool.
Yeah, one of the things that helps is you can get rid of some of your excuses, at least temporarily. Like, get plenty of sleep and have a really empty schedule for a month. And then if you still don't do stuff, then it probably wasn't because you're too tired.
Yep. So I think so. I will come up with excuses like I'm tired, and then sort of make it worse. Not necessarily make it worse, but definitely not get rid of the excuse. Um, anyway, I need to work on that.
If you can't do that, it's important to understand like what is your actual life situation and what's possible within it. Because sometimes people have goals and aspirations and stuff that are kind of utopian and ideal, and like, in theory I'd like to do this. But if they're going to spend the next 20 years being semi busy all the time, and if being semi busy is incompatible with doing it, then it's never going to happen. Even if, in theory, they would do it if they actually had, if they won the lottery and had free time all day. So some stuff, even if it is an actual thing that's getting in the way, like it really is because you're tired. If your lifestyle makes you tired all the time, you might have to find a way to cope with that problem, or admit you can't do everything because you only got limited resources and so on.
I feel like maybe there's I'm sort of thinking a bit about uh like internet rules brought up mindset and or mentality. Um anyway, that's like it's related to attitude, but I'm wondering if there's like because I haven't sort of particularly considered my mindset when approaching a lot of the sort of events around this sort of stuff. Um like in terms of if my lifestyle makes me tired, like one of the reasons is like taking on uh stuff that is a blocker for other people and like needs some like software stuff and or like coding stuff and a short time frame. Like that's the thing that comes up every now and then, uh, which then plays havoc with the rest of the schedule, but also means that I like work too much and tire myself out. Um, I wonder if there's like a way to, or that I mean, sort of is almost trivially obvious that something, if I changed something about my like attitude or mentality or mindset, then there's lots of things I could change about those things to solve that problem. Like I could believe that I'm not capable of doing anything, and then that problem would go away because I wouldn't, you know, be confident that I could help anyone. But that's sort of like a bit self-defeating. Um,
To some extent, this stuff is about prioritization. Like, you only get so much energy. You have to decide where to put it. If your lifestyle makes you too tired to do X, that means you're prioritizing certain things in the lifestyle category ahead of X, like your job or whatever.
yeah. Um,
Part of my success as a philosopher is making different choices for time and energy allocation. Um, staying away from a lot of things that other people spend those on, and like on purpose by an effort, like because it is a choice. If I got involved in tons of things people do, then I'd do less philosophy.
I feel like there's sort of like a break point in, I mean, at least like my philosophical sort of learning progress. Maybe everyone's, I'm not sure, but there's like I'm sort of getting to a or what feels like a bit of a break point. Maybe it's just me getting stuck. Where like I think about prioritization regularly and wonder why am I prioritizing certain things and like even like I still spend significant amounts of time like focused on doing the thing or whatever. But
Yeah, yeah.
I
So you're more
yeah
self-aware.
yeah. So my self awareness is I think definitely getting better. I know in terms of like factual stuff, I know a lot more than I did a few months ago, and I am like conscious of that to a degree and like integrating it. But I feel like there's sort of a gap between uh like a rudimentary but legitimate like understanding, then not just like parroting things, but something like that, and then actually like integrating it into one's life so that it's, I guess, is it like autopilot is, I guess, where I'm going with that. Like,
Yeah. Right. So ideally, this stuff would start in childhood, and you learn good methods, and then you actually use them gradually, step by step, do little projects, etc., and you build up. And um, if you don't learn them in childhood, it's a bit messier to try to go back and fix things. You have to redo some of the practice and stuff, because like you did a bunch of practice for the old method, and then you're like, I have to do this new method. So you have to like slow down on purpose. Um, it's like if you learn to type P with your ring finger, and then you want to type it with your pinky finger, you have to slow your typing speed down. Like you're already a functional typer at 100 words per minute, but to make this change to go fix it, instead of getting it right in the first place, you have to go back down to 30 words per minute or whatever and do it consciously on purpose. You do that for a while, and then it gets you get better at it, and then you can speed back up, and you speed back up much faster than you did the first time. But it does take a process that's not very like natural or intuitive, like typing slower than you know how to, is inconvenient and like can feel weird, but it's important because it's very hard to error correct things while you're going fast, or in other words, while you're in autopilot mode. Like when you're acting primarily on intuition, it's hard to change anything.
yeah, that makes sense. I can see stuff like, I mean, it's if one is typing fast, then like I notice when I make a typo, for example, even if I don't see it, uh, there's stuff like that, but I can't correct it on autopilot. I then need to like go into conscious mode to figure out where it was or which word I'm up to or whatever else. Um, yeah, that makes sense. I guess I'm worried that my like this. So I've thought this like intuition gap sort of thing, or like this difference between like intellectual understanding and like integrating it into your life. Like this is not an idea that I've had recently. This is like old. Um,
Yeah.
I wonder if I'm really inefficient at it, or like
Um,
because I don't. Um,
I don't know about that. I think
yeah, I
it's
don't
hard.
understand it.
So another part is the sort of idealized progression in childhood is a couple things at a time. You keep adding on skills, like I want to do this new project, and you learn a new skill, and then you do the project, and you go step by step. But from an adult perspective, it's like you already have 50 things you're doing. Like there's so many things at once, it's kind of overwhelming. And there's so many things that could be changed if you wanted to have sort of like a rational mindset. You could change a bunch of things. And you're not going to be able to change them all at once. There has to be a transition. It's going to be over time. And it's hard to go step by step in a really organized way because things are interconnected. And you'll find that like thinking about X triggers you, and then you have to deal with the triggering, and now you're not going in your orderly progression because you've gone on this tangent, stuff like that. So you find like some things seem higher priority or have stronger emotions or whatever, and that gets in the way of going step by step in a really easily a simple organization. So, but anyways, what you have to do is uh, always be working on a couple things, and then over time, it should get less overwhelming and more under control. Because it's like a finite number of things. It's hard at first because there's too many to start with, and it's hard to fix that and make it easy. But uh, if you just keep making progress and fixing some things, then after a year or two, it should get more under control, where you have like a smaller to-do list, and then it's easier to to pick which thing to work on next on purpose because there's less things grabbing your attention and taking you away from the one you were choosing. You'll, yeah, the frequency of things coming up that require, like, I've got to deal with this before I do the thing I plan to, should go down over time if you've actually been fixing some of them.
That's I mean, maybe a way to measure progress to some degree is like the length of your to-do list is not a good way to measure progress because like, you know, as you learn more, you're gonna find more problems and stuff as well. But um the stuff like when you do solve a problem, when you do make some progress, uh like that's usually noticeable. Um
Yeah, a
so
big thing is whether you keep getting stuck on the same things or they're different. Like if your problems are changing, then there's some sort of progress happening. People can fool themselves with this, like they can go in cycles. They can forget the past and things can be like slight variations and they don't recognize a similarity. Um, so it's pretty easy to fool yourself with that stuff, but it can also be a reasonable criterion.
yep. Um oh, I think there are things that I have gotten stuck on that I'm not getting stuck on anymore. But yeah, time management and mismatch conflict is two that I mean,
Yeah.
I sort of feel like maybe they're in I don't know if in contention might be selling it short, but they're like in contention for the biggest issues. Oh, sorry, someone's at the door. It might be mail. I'll be back in a tick. Hey, back. Sorry about that.
Okay, I wrote some thoughts about time management. The main point is it's often something else. There's time management itself as a skill, but there's also the choices you make, like I wanted to play video games today, that's why I didn't do my homework. Is probably not actually a time management skill. It's just that they like the video games and don't like their homework.
Yep. It's sort
So
of classified as time management because that's what people see, but it's not. It has nothing to do with the cause effect.
I think kids use
Um,
time management as an excuse a lot. Like, oh, I was gonna do it, I forgot. I'm so bad at managing my time. Like, it's because they don't want to say to their parent, I didn't do it on purpose. I hate it. I don't want to do it. If you can't say that, you need to blame something else.
yep, that makes sense. Well, you get like particularly punished for one, and you get like let off by comparison for the other.
Yeah. So, time management is not necessarily a thing that you're stuck on because you might not be having a problem with the meta skill and the specific incidents that come up might actually be changing over time. Like maybe previously you would not do philosophy because you did X, but that has stopped happening, and now Y comes up instead. Um, so it might be that if you deal with a few more different uses of time, the problem will improve significantly. Like you might actually be going through a fixed list of things that you need to think about and understand better and like put thought into whether you want to spend time on them and how much and why and so on. If you go through 20 things like that, then things might get better. Because it might not just be an infinite list.
As in the sort of like a list of sort of a like a bucket list type thing before I'm willing to go on with like something. Is that sort of what we mean? Like I've got a to-do list of 5 things, and once I finish those 5 things, then I will like be
I didn't
able
mean
to.
specific
No.
activities. I meant more like categories. Like you
Oh, okay.
you don't get around to philosophy because you got sucked into games. It's like a category of ways that writing doesn't happen or learning or practice or whatever. And then if you stop getting sucked into games, you might drink too much beer and you can't write because you're drunk. And then at some point you get bored with that and you're like, oh, beer is actually dumb, and you lose interest, and then you move on to the next thing. Like, I'm really busy with my job now. And then after that, it's something else. But there's like specific common ones. And if you think about each of the common ones a fair amount, you might then each time be like, I only want to do a limited amount of this. I want to have some time for abstract thought, writing, rationality, etc. in my life, um, and find a way to manage it so it's compatible with that.
Yeah. I sort of feel like there. I mean, there might be a bit of that going on. I'm just sort of thinking about because the other night I spent um I don't know, it was a good number of hours sort of like reading and catching up on stuff and posting comments and whatever else. And I don't think it was like necessarily amazingly high quality, but I was really happy to have done it. And I sort of I mean there's maybe what like why do I feel like I think there's a difference between practice stuff that I do on my own and then discussion type stuff. Um which I'm suspicious of because that feels sort of similar to, uh, like, sort of like a typical or like I don't know if it's typical or not, but like the pattern that I had, like, coming into FI for the first time, sort of thing, where I didn't wanna do any learning and I wanted to have these high level fancy discussions or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
don't think I'm anywhere as bad, but yeah, I'm not sure why I would prefer that. Actually, there are some reasons I can think of for why I'd prefer that. Um, like, I think doing some of that is good in that, you share knowledge with other people and you get a taste of what other people are thinking about, not just your own thing. Um, it's, like, diverse and interesting in a way that, like, just focusing on practicing writing or your own problems or whatever else isn't. Um,
Yeah, other people are interesting. External feedback is interesting. You can get criticism that aren't the ones you would have thought of, and you can evaluate them because you're not going to agree with all of them as well.
I think there's, like, I don't know if it's, like, a balance problem or a relative like, I relatively prefer the social sort of one or the discussion sort of side of things, like, a lot more than sitting down and doing, uh, like, writing, like, a few posts that are polished. Not necessarily, like, crazy polished, but, I mean, a lot of the time I just publish notes, which is not at all polished. Like, there's not even an editing pass or something or other, which is pretty lazy by comparison. Um,
Yeah, one of the differences is chunk size. In discussions, you tend to have small chunks. IMs are a good example where you'll write like a sentence at a time to people sometimes. And then you get feedback and you get a response and then you do another chunk. Whereas if you sit down by yourself and you write for half an hour, that could all be like one chunk, like you're writing one thing. So doing smaller pieces might be part of the appeal. So one of the things you could try again is the quick writing stuff you were doing before. Like how much can you get written in 10 minutes total? And that might be easier as well as faster and more successful and so on.
I
And
think
in
one of
some
the
ways,
benefits.
it forms good habits in some ways because you learn to create time efficient value and you learn not to make a mess and plan to clean it up later because there's no later.
Yeah, so, what I was gonna say was oh gosh. Um, like, you can't afford to like, if I do one of these, like, quick writing things and I try a topic that's too big or that's, like, beyond me at that point, um, it's really obvious when, like, you're overreaching, and with something like quick writing, it's like the bar is, uh like, there's not as much leeway for the topics, whereas when if you don't have a time limit, there's a lot more leeway because you can spend, longer thinking about each problem and, like, do research and whatever else. Um, not that's necessarily good anyway, but there's more leeway, there's less, which is like a form of criticism, like, in terms of time pressure is a form of criticism. Um, it's yeah, I have to pick topics that are suitable for, like, step 2, I think. Now I need to go look it up. Um, but the step 2 is the oh, no, I do need to go look it up. Um,
Yeah, with the autopilot and the quick writing and stuff, um, if you can't do it quickly, it tends to be expensive. Like it costs a lot of resources to do, and um, the way people think about budgets for writing and learning and just life in general with their time and their scheduling and their money are generally not very good. And that's one of the transition things is you learn a different perspective on some of those things and then you go through your life for a while and you start noticing more and more that certain activities are inefficient and you lower your opinion of them, and you notice that other ones are highly efficient and you raise your opinion of them and you start doing them more often. And it takes a while to like reevaluate a lot of things. Part of what happens is you're just going to go through your life like normal, and then you run into something, and then like one, you do it, but two, also you think about it a little bit and notice like what resources it used and how much value you got and how that compares to other activities. And you partly need like an observation period. You don't want to just go change your life around a lot all at once. Like it has some flexibility built in already, so you can make some changes quickly. Um, that's not too problematic. But if you want to make like big changes, it doesn't have that much flexibility already built in. So you want to be careful with that and observing things and just understanding your life better and understanding it from a new perspective and thinking about, if I had switched to rational mode, what would I be doing right now? Like, and how would it be different? You can think about that like a lot of times while not actually changing to it, to get like a preview and to compare and to look for would there be any problems. And then when you understand what your life is like from a more rational perspective better, then you'll have a better idea of which parts to change and why, and what's actually wrong with them, and what specifically you might do differently, and so on. And
Yeah, I feel like there's a sort of a bit of a cycle here. And the reason I feel like it's a cycle is that I feel it might be dangerous to do in parallel. Like if you're trying to observe your life and like understand things that are working and not working and that sort of thing, um, where you should spend resources or what were bad uh, sort of things to spend resources on. I sort of suspect you can't be changing something else at the same time. Um, like you can't be implementing another thing that you observed like last month, um, sort of thing. Like if the cycle
oh
goes,
yeah, work in progress is harder to observe because it's unstable. It's
yeah,
changing quickly. You don't actually know how it's going to end up.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
and because like I mean, one of the things that is sort of unsafe to assume in these sort of periods is that two areas of your life are not connected. Um, like unless you've got like a good understanding of both and like a good explanation for why you can like change both at the same time without affecting each other. And I'm not even sure that is really possible anywhere. But like unless you've got that, you can't like assume that they're disconnected or not interdependent. Um,
Yes, people's lives are more thematic than they realize. There are lots of connections between different ideas and activities and so on. Did you read The Easy Way to Quit Smoking book? I forgot.
I read it like 6 years ago or something like that. I haven't read it again recently.
Yeah. Okay, so the main
I think
thing that's relevant is it talks about um, non-judgmentally observing the smoking. Like you don't just assume the conclusion, I should stop smoking. You have this idea that maybe you should stop smoking, so you're going to pay attention to it, and then you actually you think about what is it like to smoke a cigarette while you're doing it. And if you just pay attention and gather information without trying to change it, it's actually a lot easier to change. Like it can lose its appeal when you actually understand it better without having to
mhm.
force yourself. So the
Yeah,
same
no,
thing happens with a lot of activities.
yeah. One thing that has changed, uh, like so. I mean, my like alcohol consumption is a fraction of what it was a few months ago. Or sort of like in general through adulthood before that. Um, and I think in part because whenever I think about it, there's still like occasionally when particularly when I'm like tired, like really tired. But for the most part, uh, like I don't want to because I don't feel like it's an improvement at all. Like it improves nothing. Um, and so like being conscious about that and thinking about the times where like I've had alcohol in sort of over the past few months, it's become like less and less of something that I have the desire to do. I don't think it was a bottleneck for me, but I'm sort of happy that it's actually. I mean, maybe it was, but I'm quite happy with the way it's diminished and the fact that I really don't. Uh, yeah, sort of like for the first time, like deliberately not drinking. Like if I went to a restaurant or something like that. Anyway, so um, that
Right, and
non-judgmentally
so
observing the
that
smoking
happened
reminds me of that.
without like forcing yourself.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good. Right, so that kind of thing, it makes it hard to tell how much progress you're making because there's a lot of things like that, you know. There might be like 20 things kind of similar to alcohol of categories of things that are affecting your life and whatever. And you just changed one, so maybe you're 5% done. Um, or maybe you're really, really stuck on a couple other issues, and no matter how many of the other ones are fixed, it won't actually fix it. It can be hard to tell, but it's good to have some patience and to expect major changes to happen over a couple of years, not a couple months.
yeah. Um, yeah. It's an interesting idea getting used to like I feel like when we get to like adulthood, there's a lot of uh like pressure or desire to stop changing to like figure out your life and get stable sort of thing. Um, it's a bit of a mind shift to like yeah, not focus on that, I guess. Not that I was focusing on that anyway, but it's sort of very much in the opposite direction to like expect and work towards change, like big change over yeah, relatively short time periods. Um, say relatively
Uh,
short, like
I
yeah.
was saying it kind of in the other direction, like, don't be super discouraged if everything doesn't change really quickly.
Mm. Well, I think it's sort of it's like both in the uh so I agree with the not getting discouraged thing. Uh and like on a in terms of like uh micro level stuff, like that's been an issue for me in the past as well. Like expecting that I wouldn't have issues with a particular exercise or whatever and did that sort of thing. I guess the yeah, it's sort of I don't know, it feels it I guess I just felt like it was at both ends now. Um and then it's not like working towards like a goal that you can achieve in X months or X years or anything else like that. Um like I guess what I'm saying at the point in the future, like these few years in the future that you were sort of referring to there, um that's not a point of being done. In terms of like achieving a goal, it might be stuff like dealing with most of the big problems in one's life that one has like now. So in terms of if I could
Yeah,
predict like the time management prioritization thing, if I could, say that that's the biggest issue, and then there's like the next 10 issues or the next 20 issues, um, it's sort of like in say to pick a period like 3 years, maybe I can get done with those. I'll have other problems to keep working on then. So yeah, the achievement is only a like midway in a journey type thing. Um, but yeah, but there's still like real progress in a like absolute sense between now and then. Um,
yeah. So another way to look at it is if you learn one new thinking method that is generic, so you can use it in any part of your life, then minimally you should expect it to take a few months for you to sort of live your life and then use this thinking method on all the things as they come up. You're not going to be able to day one be like, oh, this is how to think now. Let me just apply it to everything today. Because life is big and complicated. It takes a long time. It's like doing a code review on yourself with a specific thing in mind, like you're code reviewing and looking for copy paste coding, say. If you just realize copy paste coding is bad, and you have to code review everything, it's going to take a while. And it takes longer if you're reviewing more things at once. Like if you have more changes to worry about, more perspective differences and so on. And it becomes a more gradual process. So you take things like the daily budgets and mental energy and stuff. Um, it's minimally like a few months to uh, have done like a lot of different things and thought about them in that way. And so that it becomes like most stuff in your life, you have some understanding of its budget, instead of most stuff you don't. You could maybe do it faster if it was like a full-time job to just work on that one thing. But if you're doing it like while living your life, then it takes a lot longer.
Yeah, yeah. Sort of I feel like yeah, the mental energy budget thing is, I don't know, I'm sort of more aware of it, but I don't know how to quantify it. I feel like I've just learned to read the labels at like the control panel, but I have no idea what any of them really mean. I can just like pronounce the words.
Yeah,
Um, and so it's a bit chaotic. Yeah,
right.
like
So
I'm yeah overcorrecting, etc.
if you want to
Sorry, go.
work on that, there are things you can do like daily or something else like, twice a week or once a week. Um, you write like journaling about what did I do and then how tiring was it, and what sort of budget currencies got used up and what amounts by what activities. Did I overuse my budget or underuse it, etc. And if you do that on a regular basis for a few months, then you'll have more of a conscious understanding of it. But there are many
Yeah,
like little projects like that you could work on, and you're not gonna be able to do all of them at once. It would be too many things. You have to pick a few. And then I think people are wrong about the prices of a lot of their activities. I think that's a really common problem. A good example is scheduling, where they're wrong about the raw time requirements that things use. Like they frequently overbook their schedule. And I think people often also underestimate the energy requirements for things. They round down a lot. They're like, oh, that's not that hard, and don't respect how draining things are. And so just recognizing that more, like, oh, this thing actually is hard and takes up a bunch of energy, and that detracts from my energy later in the day. You learn that about more things. At some point you'll realize, oh, that's like a lot of things. No wonder I'm busy and tired all the time. Like I'm doing so many hard things. And then if I want to do these other things, like you'll have a better idea of how much you have to get rid of to actually make enough space. And like it's really
yep,
important to see that for yourself. Like you can't just have someone tell you like you're too busy, your schedule's too full, the stuff you do is too tiring, and you're too tired a lot. You know? You need to, like, someone can tell you that and then you can start looking for it, but you have to find the examples in your own life and decide for yourself what your evaluation of each activity is and so on.
yep, yeah. Um, no, I agree. I think I call that like sort of emotional understanding, or like sort of making it intuitive, sort of like a um yeah. I agree. I was just thinking about this like little learning cycle sort of thing that I've typed up, and I feel like so say with like something like the mental energy thing. So I've got the idea for something that might be an issue. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's this observing, learning, understanding sort of thing, which I feel like I'm partway through, or maybe bordering on finding solutions because, like, that's in part what this the past few minutes was about. Um, like journaling is a way to try and like document it, and well, actually, that would be understanding it more, but in a more rigorous way that would actually allow me to move on to finding solutions. Um,
Yeah. It's possible to make progress without much conscious attention. Like even if you don't ever journal about it, if you just wait 6 months and you don't forget about it, like it doesn't just leave your mind and get completely ignored. If you're sort of semi-aware of it the whole time for 6 months, then you'll find that your intuitions about it are better. Like maybe not a ton better, but something will change. You tend to gradually get better at things over time if you manage to like still remember and care about them instead of just, oh, I forgot about it. If you
yeah,
keep it like
uh,
semi-active in your mind, you'll gradually make progress, even if it's not a conscious priority that gets a bunch of like written analysis.
yeah. Um, so I think this has been maybe even my like primary method of learning in some ways, particularly for anything that's not coding related. In that I'll yeah, like read a book or think about like the ideas in this sort of enduring way for months and months, and eventually it sort of becomes integrated into sort of my worldview, almost like piecemeal, almost. Like one of the
Yeah,
examples for stuff like that is like my attitude towards like relationships with other people. Like all relationships, whether it's like family, romantic, friends, whatever, um, has like had these like slow incremental sort of things. Um, but it's like taken like I'll have an idea or be introduced to an idea or something, and then it'll take like months of like running into situations where I get to actually like apply the idea. Um, and actually, it's sort of contingent on running into situations where I can apply the idea. In the same way that like with Easy Way, like it's contingent on continuing to smoke so that you can do the observing. Like one of the things that I guess occurs to me here is like this like continually non-judgmentally observing it um is so it's sort of I mean in the case of the smoking thing, it pushes you towards like so you sort of like think you like it, and then you've got this like bit of ambivalence, or like doubt starts to creep in or whatever else, and then like continuing to do it really pushes you over the edge. As opposed to if you stopped early, then you don't get pushed over the edge. You don't end up seeing it for yourself as much. Um, but if you,
yeah.
yeah,
I
so
mean, the reason people have to use a bunch of willpower is they're not convinced. Like they haven't seen the negatives enough. The negatives are not intuitive enough to them. Like they can consciously list a bunch of negatives, but they don't have enough intuition about them.
mm,
The negatives don't resonate with them, stuff like that. Which is actually connected to conscious understanding. Like you can do rational analysis and get better resonance and intuition and so on if you do it well enough. But people usually don't do it like at that level of skill. So then they need to do other supplemental things because their rationality is not good enough to do the whole job by itself. So they sort of think it should be or something and then try to act on it.
yeah, um, I think that's so. I think this like this sort of stage or the um, like either the being able to do it to completion or not, like sort of fits with the mastering solutions thing in that like the implementation is the first part of the non-judgmentally observing the smoking, and then the mastering is the pushing through. Um, and it's one of those things where maybe I guess the part where I feel like I've dropped the ball with regards to like the reviewing stuff and the writing and whatever else is not following through. There's lots of stuff that I've learned, but if I don't like practice it, or if I don't have I am like thinking about it still, but it's no doubt less effective than if I was using it more actively. Um, Yeah.
Yeah,
It's an
so I think
like master.
what's important is one of the main important things with the tutoring is that you don't just forget about stuff from a couple months ago. Like review enough that they can keep sinking in and getting some attention over time. That way
Yeah.
they can go through this gradual improvement process. And so you can focus on a couple of them at a time, but then you also want to have like a little bit of awareness of most of the other ones so they don't just get lost.
Yep. Yeah. Sort of wondering, I mean, an idea in the back of my mind is that, uh, so maybe there's like a good reason that a lot of learning stuff has an on again, off again model, not just because of like convenience to do with school holidays or, uni semesters or stuff like that. Um, but like literally we like need, or on again, off again models are maybe actually just really useful. Um,
Yeah, having some sort of cycle where you learn stuff and then you use it and then after you've used it for a while you have a better understanding of what's wrong with it and what could be better and so on, and then you go back to a learning phase. Makes some sense in general. You see that with like learning video games. Like you can do a theory crafting session, then you play for a while and try to use your ideas. And then after you've played for a while, you're in a better position to do your second theory crafting session. You can go back
yeah,
and
yep,
forth.
yeah. So I mean, it's yeah, one of the things that I guess, so it seems like there's sort of a bit of a recursive slash fractally type thing here in that, like for really small stuff, like practicing a speedrun route, you can like do a few hours of practice and then an hour or 2 hours of like actual runs. Maybe continue that, maybe go back to practice. You've got like this micro period. Um, I wonder if it sort of like scales up in a general way. I don't think it can scale indefinitely. It doesn't make sense to have like periods of like 10 years off and 10 years on type thing. Um, Even that would be like
Right, yeah.
underlying sort of thing. Um,
You don't want to do too
might
much
have been noticeable.
theorizing without actually trying out the ideas in general. And you don't want to do too much just using your existing ideas without ever getting around to doing some conscious analysis and like reconsider, are they actually working? But yeah, going back and forth reasonably often makes sense. And yeah, you need the cycles because you can't do both at once. You can do both at once like a little bit, like you can play the game while consciously keeping in mind a few strategy ideas, but you can't like actively theory craft while playing a real-time game that's like decently paced. You don't have enough focus to do everything at once.
Yeah, no, you can sort of like, I mean, I think the most you end up, or that at least I end up getting is, like you might have an idea or the beginning of an idea for something to try, but you can't like investigate it at that point. You've got to either say it out loud or hope you remember or whatever else. Um, or stop the run. Like sometimes people will do that. Like if when someone like discovers a new glitch, um,
Yeah.
yeah, they have to like change modes entirely. Um, yeah. Um, sorry, I'm just writing down a thing. Um, just a thing to talk about briefly before the end. So one thing I was thinking in terms of last 20 odd minutes or so, um, I feel like there was a thing earlier where not sure if it was before I went to get mail. I sort of either wanted to come back to it or wanted to talk about it more. It was like
Was it the time management and the mismatch? Because I remember you had two things, and then we talked about time management a lot.
um this part.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I think I was saying yeah, around this time, like I feel like this is like my biggest, well, like the bottleneck sort of thing. And I feel like this is a
I guess what we talked
uh
about is actually related to both a lot. The
mm,
mismatch thing is similar to like observing your life and seeing how well things work and like having a new perspective on them will help with mismatches.
yeah. Um I feel like prioritization is actually something that I've been thinking about for a lot longer than a few months. Like I remember that as a thing that came up in like 2017. Um because I hadn't considered like yeah, stuff like that, like whatever you're choosing to do, you're implicitly showing, like saying that you're like the biggest priority, or I am sort of implicitly saying that my biggest priority in the world right now is like doing this tutorial, because that's what I'm choosing to do. And I hadn't considered prioritization as this sort of thing, in that I
Yeah.
guess I sort of like,
People do a lot of sort of societal defaults and they don't
yeah,
realize they have a choice.
is the model like we sort of presume that we're like almost like partial slaves sort of thing, as in like not slaves to anyone particularly, but like um in the sense of like we have these like obligations and whatever else that we have to do, uh
Kind
sort
of.
of
I
like
don't
the
know. It comes up in business. Like people have to be told, if you're trying to make a startup and you're doing an activity, like consider how much value is this bringing to the business? Like, will this activity contribute to the startup ever making money? And like how much money will it contribute potentially? If the answer is like nothing, then don't do it. Go do something else that'll actually move the needle. And because people actually screw that up a lot. They'll do like busy work that's never really going to make them money and doesn't really have to be done. Which
yeah,
is what employees do that a lot, but it matters more directly when you're doing a startup.
you've got, yeah, well, there's less buffer essentially. I mean, you've almost got like negative buffer in that the business is not sustainable by definition.
Yeah, and
um
employees like don't care that much what happens to the business usually.
no, well, I mean, in sort of at the far other end, um I've expressed the idea that we, we as employees should be considering how we are like valuable to the business and how we're contributing and whether it's actually doing like, a benefit or not. Um, and essentially not had people like outright disagree with me, but like heavily discourage that sort of
Yeah,
discussion or whatever.
there's a lot of attitude that that's for the management and the executives to think about, and it's you can't actually do a good job of that stuff as an employee unless they give you a lot of information. Like basically, the CEO has to be transparent. Like, what is the business's plan? What are the goals? What things will actually move the needle? If they won't share that information, then you can't synchronize with it as a low level employee. And if they do share that information, then they're sort of giving a window into what their job is and what they do and stuff, and they lose some of like a lot of CEOs. Um, they make their decisions behind closed doors so that they can dole out favors for social hierarchy reasons, and so that's incompatible with sharing all their decision making so the low level employees can synchronize. Um, so yeah, that is a problem. But a lot of businesses make it hard for the employee to do the right thing. Is the point? Yeah, they don't want to get risk being corrected is another factor. And they don't want to give you input. Like if they're being transparent and you can reply, then like you're sort of a co-CEO. Like what's the point of being CEO if you don't get to make arbitrary decisions and you're have the authority that your way goes?
I
If
mean,
it's
it's sort
just the
of this.
best idea is gonna win, like why are you even there? I mean, skill, skill at
um,
making good decisions.
well, arguably, like that should be the case, but Well, there's a secondary sort of like way to look at that though, which is that like a CEO who is able to like receive questions in open from employees and give satisfactory answers, like in a consistent basis, and when there is something they miss, which is presumably less common, um, then like they take it on board. Like that, I feel like most people would say that's a high quality CEO. Or that's
Yeah,
like good traits for a CEO to
that
have.
would be powerful, but most people can't do that, including most
Yeah,
CEOs. It's
and that's yep.
what you described sounds a lot like Pals Forward.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
mean,
most people are not very
um,
good at that.
um, one thing that occurred to me while we were talking about that was, like in terms of contributing to the goal of the business, uh, I agree that like without transparency, it can be hard to know whether you're like contributing or not. Um, I mean, obviously, in some ways, there's like some stuff that you can pretty much rely on as contributing. Um, like the person who cleans the office, they don't really need to know much about the business strategy to know whether they're contributing or not decently. Um, but for higher level stuff or tertiary, like knowledge based work, that can be difficult. But there's some, like one thing that occurs, like there's a lot of patterns where we can pretty much be sure it's not contributing. Um, and I think this a lot of those sort of like patterns are the stuff that we see in like the stuff that's associated with like bad corporate culture. Um,
E- Even the office cleaner can have synchronization problems. Like, if the business is doing really well, then a support role like that is valuable. Like, make things a little bit nicer, the budget can afford it, it helps other people be more productive. If the business is doing really badly, and it's like in a budget crisis, then they sort of desperately need him to actually switch tasks and try to do something that'll help in a different way, potentially. Like it might no longer be a priority thing.
yeah, so I guess this is like there's like a difference of um like absolute productivity, which a lot of people like do and think is okay. Uh, but like in essence, it's like having a project and not working on a thing that's in the critical chain, or the critical path. Uh, like you're not working on a bottleneck, you're not really helping things move forward, even though like you're being productive, you're producing something. It's not zero, it's non-zero. Um, Relatively, it's negative value, and that there's actually like opportunity cost that means that you're like losing the business money, not making the business money. Um,
Yeah. There's other stuff for
anyway,
the cleaner. Like if he knew whose contributions were moving the needle, he could prioritize helping them. Like go talk to the most important people and find out which sort of cleaning will reduce their stress and headaches and whatever, and then like put significant effort into not distracting them, not getting in their way, but making sure their stuff is always clean and nice and whatever. And then do like regular occasional cleaning for the people who don't matter so much.
yeah, yeah. Um, no, yeah. You've convinced me that the Office Cleaner has like multiple potential synchronization issues. Um,
Yeah, I think that's notable because they're everywhere. That's kind of the point.
hmm.
Um, every single person in the company can be synchronized with company goals, better or worse.
Is there some like perceived goal that people has or have that has like some reach beyond a single company? Sort of like so the cleaner that we just mentioned that is like particularly effective that is doing one of the best jobs they possibly could, sort of thing, well above the average. uh like that sort of, I imagine that those sort of cleaners are hard to find, partially because cleaners are like often sort of treated as somewhat disposable in the sense that like there'll be a contracting firm involved and they've got staff who like change regularly, there's high turnover, that sort of thing. um I wonder if there's like a set of things that people synchronize to that isn't actually necessarily in the interest of any company, but it's like a safe way to operate in the sense that it's like sort of like a baseline that people can.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of defaults for what people assume matters in companies, A bunch of them are related to cost accounting and local optima, which Goldratt has talked about a lot.
Yeah, that's one thing that
And people have a sort of generic model in their mind of what a company is. Like it has product creation and then sales and marketing and legal and HR and executives. And they have sort of an idea of how those functions fit together and where the money comes from and what the job of each silo is. So, like, if they're in the marketing department, they're like, okay, our job is to make sure more people know about the product and will buy it. That way, our company can make more money. And so they figure if they're doing that well, then they're doing a good job. And, that can often work to some approximation, especially in more normal companies instead of weirder ones.
it means as well, like just think about like the idea of cost accounting in general. It's a like you can judge stuff without knowing anything about the business. Like you can just look at a microcosm of one balance sheet and judge it, which means that it's like
Yeah.
incredibly portable. It's not good, but uh
Yeah, Goldratt talks about that. Part of why it was developed is managers needed some sort of synchronization method of, like, how do you make decisions at all? And they didn't have good computers and databases and stuff to actually get good data between different functions in the company. It was a lot harder to take a more global approach.
yeah.
So it helped them get started. And it worked better in some of the old circumstances. For example, um, paying laborers per part used to be a lot more common instead of just per month. So you can actually connect costs and productivity more in the past. This is why Goldratt talks about like increasing productivity doesn't actually reduce your costs because you don't actually fire anyone, um, and you're not actually paying per part created either,
Hmm.
or per hour or whatever, even like per actual hour worked on the thing. Like you can't actually connect a lot of things to the price of the labor as well, because our we have like these very complicated systems with significant problems. But there we are. But anyway, yeah, some of the stuff is designed to allow people to operate locally and have it make some sense at least. Like the marketing silo gets a budget and they're told, okay, like don't spend more than this or you'll bankrupt the company. Like this is all you get. And then if they stick to that budget, then it's probably not a disaster, even if it's not the most efficient. Because they probably don't know enough about what are the profit margins on different products and what are the bottlenecks in production and how much can we make of different ones and so on to know actually like how they should focus their marketing efforts.
I'm just getting the sense that this is like it's not just like people in the business thing that would like to use cost accounting for various things. Like I think it sort of removes responsibility and stuff from the CEO. Um, like they've got a definite reason for saying why they did everything, and it's all backed up by stuff. Uh, it
Yeah, that makes sense. There's to some
I
extent
feel like
he's
it's
like,
like
okay, I've done these normal delegations, so I've done a good job. And like I hired good people, I have good functions in the company and each one's being reasonable and it's a little bit different than I have a good explanation about what we should be doing and how to make things fit together.
yeah. Um, Not just that, it plays into like creative accounting that's used to manipulate stock prices, which directly affects CEO bonuses. That's like I presume become like it seems like it's become the most common way to manage like CEO wage and entitlements and stuff in large corporations today. Um, or at least it's very common. So there's sort of a bit of a vicious cycle in the way that it's enforced. Um, Particularly because if you have the CEO with good explanations versus the CEO with like the traditional, balance sheet type stuff and stock market price sort of attached in a folio. Um, what are most board of directors going to be choosing, or who are they going to be choosing? Um, and then the CEO with the folio, who is he going to be? Well, he's going to be hiring. a CEO and a CFO who have the same like management ideas that are broken in the same way but are transferable, which of course is convenient because they jump around from company to company every 2 years. Um, anyway, yeah, there's like seems like a bit more of an insidious cycle now.
Yeah, there's a lot of things wrong there.
Um, quickly before the end, so one thing is, I think I'm like, I don't know, I'm not gonna like promise to do anything because every time I say, oh, this is what I'm gonna try and do or whatever, I don't feel like I end up doing it or like, not meeting it or whatever else. So I'm concerned about all this anyway, so I'm gonna be thinking about it. I'd like to write some stuff. Um, one
Okay.
thing, one thing though, in terms of that I did want to remember, I wrote this down yesterday. Um, I was thinking about uh, oh, I can post the full thing on. I wrote up like a little notepad thing. I'll post it on Kiri later. Um, but like, so I think if we could test for dependent or independent variables, like according to some explanation, that might be like particularly valuable because like dependence and independence of variables
What type
is
of dependence, like cause and effect?
uh yeah, or like any like causal relationship. So yeah, I guess cause and effect. Um,
Okay.
so I'm thinking like formulas, uh stuff like I mean, yeah, human level cause effect stuff. I mean basically anything where you can if you can codify something to say, well actually, I mean, if there's not a causal relationship between two things, then that's independent. So it's just that quality. Like if an explanation says that that there is cause and effect between them, then they're dependent, and if there's not, then they're independent. Um, I feel like this could be a source of like meta criticism of classes of ideas, but I don't know of a way that you would actually like test for it. Um,
I think you'd
I'm not
need
sure
some
if this.
examples. Like, come up with a couple problems and then brainstorm some solutions and then find out how you would use this idea where it would come up in the process. I'm not really sure what you would do with it, or like it's overly abstract, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Um,
certainly cause and effect and dependence come up in various ways in thinking, but I don't know like what specific methods or techniques you have in mind.
yeah. So I will. I've got one example which was what I was thinking about when I like had the idea, but uh, I mean, it's to do with it was just like trying to figure out emulator options. Like if you had like 10 different checkboxes for like different hacks or whatever that you could turn on in an emulator. Um, how do you figure out what works and what doesn't without knowing the full explanation for what each of them does? That was sort of where I started. Um, but yeah, I wrote a few hundred words, so I'll just post that later. I need
Okay.
to think more about how. So I sort of got to this point of asking whether it was like whether this is a thing we could test for. Um, but I don't really know what I'd want out of that. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously we
Cause
have like
effect models are really powerful in general, like understanding what the root causes are, what causes what,
hmm, well,
how things
yeah.
fit
I mean,
together.
are there any non-causal explanations? I mean, or I guess there's sometimes there's just like relationship stuff, like a geometric description of a circle. Like there's no like cause effect between
Well,
the
an
radius and
explanation is
the
a why, basically. So just a
yeah.
description isn't an explanation.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, no, okay.
But like,
Yeah, no,
okay,
if
so
we
if you
ask
talk
something.
about why a geometric description of a circle is important or useful or something, then you'd be explaining something. Um, there's not necessarily a cause effect. That cause effect generally has to do with physics, physical world, physical events.
Mhm.
So if you just think about abstract things like why do I like this might not have a cause effect directly. There will be some cause effect that's relevant because you're liking a thing in the physical world and what are its properties, what does it cause, what are its effects, etc. But the actual explanation itself, like I like I was gonna say I like ice cream because it tastes good, but then because it tastes good is a effect of the cause of eating it. That wasn't a good example.
Well, I mean, maybe something like, I like country music, and I don't care if you don't like country music, I just like it, so leave me alone. Like, there's that sort of thing that
That's a
people say
pretty
occasionally.
bad explanation.
Um, yeah, I'm sort of clutching at straws to avoid
Maybe if
having
you
any
like
effect in that.
something because it's elegant, there isn't a clear cause and effect. You could try to say it's because you feel you feel good because you see the elegance, but that might not really be it. It might be more of just I like the concept of elegance, sort of in an abstract way, not because it evokes an emotion.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, um, not a particularly important question, I feel like. Not necessarily, at least. Um, alright, cool. Uh, see each other again in 3 days?
Yep. Bye.
Cool. Alright, see you then.